Yes. So welcome everyone, and please remember to add your name, title, and organization to the chat. So we have a nice sign-in sheet, virtual sign-in sheet.
Hey, Annabelle, I am not able to, for some reason, there's no chat option for me when I
Hmm.
go into Teams, and I don't understand why, but I'm here. I'm going to go grab my lunch, and then I'll be sitting here eating and listening.
Very good. We need to, well, bring your computer to the conference and we'll figure it out.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
There you go. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna send you an email, Kelly, with some links in it. Because I'm gonna be putting those in the chat. So I'll send it to you in
Mm-hmm.
email so that you'll have them.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Mary.
No problem.
We'll start in a couple of minutes. Hi, Renee. Holly, go get coffee.
Share
I'm
it.
yawning.
You look tired, girl. Just imagine that you are in the beach that is right behind you.
I know.
I'm going to the beach the week after the conference, so I'm excited about that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Jealous more than a little.
Oh.
Not gonna lie.
After the conference, I have baby number 2.
Oh, wow.
Sabrina wants to know where's the hammock in the beach. Let me see, Holly. There's none. Oh, no, no, no. We can't see from here.
Just a boat on the beach.
But that's good enough, the boat. So I think we have.
If I mute you, don't take it personally. I'm just kind of muting to eliminate background noise, but of course, you can come off mute and ask questions at any time.
Well, thank you everyone for joining. It's 9:03. Well, 9:03 where I am. It's 11:03. So thank you all for joining us. We have a packed agenda for today. Um, and it's a lot of technical stuff, so I hope that nobody falls asleep. There's going to be a test soon, so be careful. Don't fall asleep. So I am Annabel Cruz Orengo. I am the Senior Director of Operations for Tennessee Charitable Care Network, and we're really pleased to have you here, just in case anybody in the chat doesn't know me. So Mary Moore is going to help me with the slides because I use a lot of my hands and all that stuff, and I need to be, she's going to help with that. Remember to add any questions in the chat, or you can even raise your hand because there's a lot of technical details here that we want to make sure that everybody has a good understanding of what we're talking about. So today, our training and technical assistance is going to be about just an introduction of grant compliance, because grant compliance includes a lot of stuff. Today, we're mostly going to be talking about Title VI and just an overview of what are internal controls. So with that in mind, let's start the presentation. Okay, so we're just going to talk slightly about what is grant compliance, what are the responsibilities to fund recipients, and that includes you and us, all the same conditions that we have to meet as the main grantee are shared with the subgrantee. So welcome to the sharing. So the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is one of the main topics today. But we decided to also talk about Title VII because there's a lot of confusion about those two terms. And then, we're going to talk a little bit more about internal controls, and we will have some time for questions. In between there, I'm not going to tell you where we're going to have a test, so pay attention. So let's start with a quick definition of what is compliance. And I got this from Merriam-Webster dictionary. So the best way of talking about compliance is willingness and readiness to, yield to the wishes of others. That sounds a little bit weird, but in the case of a contract or a funder, it's none other than being ready and being, have the interest of really doing the right thing. That's why we are always talking about, are you in compliance? Compliance means many things. It could be from HR, payroll, accounting, record keeping, management of documents, IT. So that's why I keep saying we're just going to talk a little bit about what is compliance because it's huge. So next slide. So when we're talking specifically about grant compliance, in general, we're following standards set by others, in this case, government, oversight boards, as an example, accounting. The general accounting procedures are set by an individual body of experts in that field. And even standards set by your own organization, which means your policies and procedures. We can't forget them. Now, standards could be different. It could be program rules and requirements. It could be how you document your procedures, how you document the progress in the service you provide, how you document the impact you have over the patients you serve. And of course, how can we show all that? By reporting data. I know that every time that we talk about reports, it's like, goosebumps all over, but the only way that we can show our compliance is some sort of report. And there's many of them. They could be as simple as a spreadsheet. It could be as simple as providing supporting documentation of what you're trying to build the state or you're trying to build us, or it could be just as a training that we're doing today. Because Title VI is a main requirement for every state and federal agency. So that's why the sign-in sheet, the electronic sign-in sheet that we're going to keep today, something as simple as a sign-in sheet, is an evidence for compliance. So let's go. Now, every fund recipient, and again, we are together in this party, that means you and us, have to pay attention to these details here. These are main responsibilities. How we do this, the list is huge. So this is just training one of what could be many trainings talking about how can we do this, right? How can we comply? So remember something. When we get some funds, it's for a purpose. It's to carry out specific goals and objectives. Where are those? In the grant, in the contract. We have those listed right there. You agree on doing activity A, B, or C. That is your goal and your objectives. It's right there. But when we are in the process of doing that, we need to keep in mind the regulations, what kind of oversight or controls we're going to put in place to show that we are doing the right thing. And of course, you're open to being audited either by our auditors, your auditors, or at some point, state or federal auditors. That could happen. In other words, every grant recipient becomes a steward of those federal funds. We need to make sure that we understand the word stewardship, that we receive them not as a gift to do whatever we want. We receive them in order to meet an intended purpose. Imagine that this grant dollars is not because you just won Mega Million or something, which is getting high again. The federal funds that you're receiving are taxpayer dollars, and they came to you for an intended purpose. We need to, of course, make sure that whatever we do with those funds can be accounted for, that we could keep evidence of how we use those funds and to justify those expenditures, how those expenditures connect with those goals and objectives that we saw in the item number 1. So when we are using federal funds, it's not for your personal enrichment, it's not for personal gain, it's really for the intended purpose of the grant. Otherwise, we may be talking about possible theft and even to be subject to criminal and civil prosecution under the laws of the state. So in this case, we're not only talking about the oversight provided in this case by the Tennessee Department of Health, which is one of our main funders, or AmeriCares or Sustento. It's also the CDC and HRSA, but it's also the possibility of having to go and work with the state's controller. So it goes to many different levels. Now, Mary, I'm not sure if you can click on that link, but the main source of information that we all have is the agreement. Let me actually open that quickly here, and I can share that with you. Because every agreement, let me pull that quickly, has a list of activities, a list of everything. Give me 1 second while I pull it. So when we prepare a contract, it's literally a copy in many sections of the contract that we have with the state. The scope of services and deliverables tells you what are the goals, what are the objectives, why are you getting these funds. Payments and amounts usually defines how much you're going to get paid and when. What are the conditions for getting paid? Always pay attention if that is by reimbursement, if you have to provide documentation for, what are you doing with those expenses. There is always a section about contingency. We have all the best intentions, but remember that this comes from one entity to another. And sometimes that takes some time. And this contingency is almost available in every state or federal contract, just reminding you that if something happens and those funds are no longer available, things could change. Then every contract has a section with the terms, and it tells you what is the project timeline. So essentially, activities before or after those dates are not allowed. And then finally, you see the standard terms and conditions. In this section, almost everything, every bullet that starts in bold is exactly as our contract with the state said. It states. So everything about conflict of interest, anti-terrorism, lobbying, that all comes from the contract that we have with the state. So I know that is long, and I know that it sometimes have a lot of technical details, but this is what you need to know and what you need to comply with. Non-discrimination, these are the basis for Title VI and Title VII, which we will discuss later. The public notice, the signage that you have to have available in your facilities. Public notice every time you have a pamphlet, every time you put something on your website, and it's paid with the funding from any of the grants, we need to have this line right here. The project is funded under a grant contract with the state. You don't even need to mention the grant contract. However, some federal grants requires that you even mention the contract number, the funding source, everything on it. But for now, with the state of Tennessee, we're not required to do that. Also, compliance has to do with the records. How long are you going to keep those records? And in which basis? And here you see all the different authorities or boards or groups that have some saying on those terms. Of course, we have details about confidentiality, and then just basic stuff about procedure. Any amendment needs to be in writing. That this document summarizes all the agreements. There's nothing else that we discussed 3 months ago. No, it has to be here. So as you can see, the contract is your main source of information of what you are agreeing with the state or with us. And as you saw, it's exactly what we have in our own contracts with the state, only that is more beautiful because I did it. Now, today, from everything we're going to could be included within compliance. We're going to talk about two main things. One has to do with service, and service specifically Title VI and other civil rights laws. Another section will be about the use of funds, and that one has to do with internal controls. Again, compliance has to even includes also how you physically protect information or files, but that's, that could be another topic. Let's start talking about Title VI. Well, every time we talk about Title VI, no, go to the next one.
Oh, I didn't know. Do we want to do the quiz first or after?
No,
Okay.
later.
Okay, good.
It's to see if people is paying attention, if they all got their coffee. So Title VI, when we talk about Title VI, it's Title VI of Civil Rights Act of 1964. Remember these words, and everything that is highlighted or I'm sorry, on bold or underlined here. No person in the United States shall, on the grounds of race, color, of national origin, these three conditions, be excluded from participating in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Now remember, it's not telling you that it's because you have a contract with the federal government. It says that any program or activity that receive any kind of financial federal funds. So it doesn't matter that it's passed through the state of Tennessee Department of Health, TCCN, and then it goes to you. So there's like two in between entities there. It doesn't matter, it's federal funds. But let's focus on these words here: race, color, and national origin. I think that, in other words, this is so important that we don't put labels on people just by how they look. We could be so off in what our idea of an individual could be, or we think that this person may come from this place, and we start talking about, I think this comes from this other place, it has this accent. Be careful. It doesn't matter how they look, how they talk. Those are our patients. Now, there's three things here. We're not just talking about denying services. We're talking about even excluding them. And it could be that, through time, there have been a lot of regulations created because intentionally we have changed the restrictions of the program in a way that we keep a sector of the community out, or because intentionally we made everything so much difficult to this patient, and we put additional roadblocks, and we made everything so difficult that the person cannot get to the finish line getting your service. Or that in general, going to the extreme, that we actually use words, behaviors, or just nonverbal language that is evidently discriminatory. A lot of people thought that Title VI was specifically about the things you say, you do, or you do not do. But actually, when we put together a program and when we define the program and how to access the program, that is also an area that we need to, keep in mind when we are working on it. We're just defining the program. How do we define that? Is that connected with our mission and our goals? And in that sense, what we are practicing is what we are saying we're going to do. This is important because sometimes we say, no, we work with all the underserved and those that are uninsured. Okay, nice. That is huge. That is huge. When we're talking about, I created a program that I want to make sure benefits everyone that does not have insurance. Okay, which population is in that bucket? It is big because it touches a lot of different demographics. So if we are willing to say and put in our website that we're going to serve everyone under these parameters, are we putting in place policies, procedures, or systems that will really allow everyone that falls within that group to get the service? Or we are making it more difficult to one group versus another? Because that is a way of, really discriminating, not with words, but with actions. So let's go to the next slide. This is one perfect example. We know that most of the patients that visit the clinics and those that are uninsured may have a limited English proficiency. So what is that? We're talking about someone that English is not their first language, but could have any limitation in the ability to read, speak, write, or understand English. Maybe this individual can speak English, but cannot read it really well. Maybe the person can read and sort of have an idea, but when it's time to write a sentence or put something in writing, they can't do it. There's all these levels of understanding of English. Remember that every time we communicate, even in paper, even through social media, even in the website or in person, the idea is that when the speaker is sending the message, that listener could completely understand that message and can provide you feedback. So with individuals with limited English proficiency, they may understand the message, but can they respond to that message? Maybe not. So that's why in this definition, we have 4 conditions: read, speak, write, and understand English. So remember just a minute ago when I was telling you guys that when we say we're going to serve this population, that is not only about active discrimination, what processes, what tools do we have to really serve them entirely? This is one perfect example. How do we overcome the roadblock of just language barrier? By finding out if all the individuals that may visit your clinic will be able to read, speak, write, and understand what you're telling them, that they will be able to communicate with you without roadblocks, and that they can give you some feedback. And this sentence here, it's I always said that this is Tariq's words, but it has summarized so much of what we're trying to tell you with the grants. Our goal is to become culturally and linguistically appropriate. Because remember, if we go back to the previous slide, Title VI includes race, color, and national origin. So when we're talking about national origin, we may be fine with the language, but we need to understand that culturally, we need to be appropriate. We need to be welcoming. That way, we are trying the individual holistically, right? In every way, that we're not making them feel less because they cannot speak English or less because they cannot understand the document. And why is this so important? We have tons of forms that we give our clients. We're not even talking about the actual interaction with the medical provider. Tons of forms that they have to sign consenting many things, most of them required by the state. How do we know that they understand what they're consenting to, what they're agreeing to? Do they understand the treatment that has been delineated for them? That's even more serious than a consent form. Because if we create a treatment, but that person does not understand what it's reading, it's going to fail. And most importantly, and which is even worse, that person sadly could get worse because cannot understand the instructions. So Title VI connects with understanding who could have a limited understanding of English, in addition to how we provide a service. But essentially, our goal is that during the provision of the service, we're always culturally and linguistically appropriate with our patient and even visitors, because maybe the patient understand, but from some cultures and in my world as Hispanic, we always, sometimes it's a kid, so there's the grandma, and I have 8 grandkids, so I have gone to a bunch of doctor's appointments because I want to be there. I want to make sure that I can support my grandkid properly. So that is a particular distinction within one group, that there's going to be a ton of people there. So how do we accommodate for that in a respectful way? Maybe the meeting room only allows for 2 people, but just say that in a nice way, respecting that particular cultural component. Not like, no, that's a bunch of people, you cannot come here. No, 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 no. No, how can you convey that message? The room is smaller, so we can only allow 2, uh, individuals per patient. It's very different than trying to make people feel like, no, you're not welcome. Okay, so next slide. Okay, of course, that law, Title VI, opened the door to many laws. And you may remember during the civil rights movement, it was a moment of understanding. So opening the eyes to something that was really there, but it was never in paper. So we started with Title VI, but in the same year, they enacted Title VII. Now pay attention. Title VII prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. This one has 5 different areas, and each one of them through time has evolved in other clarifications and other laws, just to make sure that people understand what is included there. But this one talks, Title VII is about employment discrimination, not about provision of services, okay? Now, remember that every time we talk about, for example, sex, later other laws came to explain what is the actual and broader definition of sex. It's not about gender only, okay? Now, there's other laws that came pretty close to this one. Then is Title IX. That was enacted in 1972. And that one prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, specifically sex, in all federally assisted education programs and activities in federally funded educational institutions. There's a bunch of federally words, right? Remember, these are programs that could be even in a daycare. As long as it's funded with any kind of federal funds, it's applicable. It could be a college. It could be, school. But this one specifically is about sex. And in this Title IX, a lot of information came trying to clarify that when we talk about sex, it's not only about gender. And you may recall that also it started talking about harassment. That came as part of the clarifications and definitions under the term of sex. We have Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. In this case, it prohibits recipients of federal funds from discriminating against individuals with disabilities. And now, another law that has continued evolving is also known as ADA. Now it's ADAAA because it has continued evolving. So sometimes you hear people saying ADAAA because the definition of what is a disability continue growing as the medical knowledge and the scientific community understands that there's other areas, not only with your physical health, but your mental health that could affect people from getting services, doing their work, understanding materials, etc. This is also very important. All these laws continue evolving as other things within the community or just general understanding or scientific understanding allows or brings more information to the table. Now, remember that in essence, everything we see here can be summarized into 2 words: No discrimination. But again, discrimination is not only closing the doors to someone because it looks one way or it talks this way. It's about everything, how we talk, how we communicate, with social media. It's how we provide a service or how we do not provide a service. All that could be on the basis of discrimination. Now, let's go to the next one. Test number 1. Mary is including in the chat this particular link. I need all of you to go to the chat. You see, it's in if you look at the top of your screen where you have Teams, not close to the leave button, but to the far left on the chat. If you click that, you'll see this nice picture right here that it shows, a hand with the phone. Click on that link. It will take you to a question. You see Mary's showing it right there.
This is the link.
You click on the link or the picture. When you click here, you have a question. What is Title VI? So there's 3 options: race, religion, and national origin, or race, color, and national origin, or race, sex, and color. Let's see, only 8 people have participated, and there is 21 people here. Or more. Let's see. We have 23 people. And thank you, Aklisha, for setting this up.
It's going great.
We have 10. We need more. If I tell you that those that have it right could win a car, I'm pretty sure that we will increase the number of participants.
It could happen. Anything's possible.
Let's see. 1 more minute. Come on. Sabrina, let's see if your answer is right. Let's see. Come on, a couple more. Title VI prohibit discrimination based on okay, Tammy said that she cannot participate. You went to the chat and try clicking on the picture of the where you have the phone. Can you see that in the chat, Tammy? Okay, let's see how many do we have, Mary? Okay, who wants the Lexus? Let's see. Okay, let's see what's the answer. Letter B. So there's a bunch of participants here that may want a Lexus, but I forgot to tell you that the Lexus I have is like this small. It's really pretty. It's like this small. So let's see if people were paying attention. I know that Holly was getting coffee. Now, Title VII prohibits what? Employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. Discrimination during the provision of services based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin, or employment discrimination to job applicants based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. Let's see. Let's see. Keep voting. Use the new link that Mary sent. And if you cannot go there through the link, you can go to www.menti.com and use that code right there on the top. Let's see. Let's see who was paying attention or who needs more coffee. Well, 14 people. Let's see, Mary. Which one is it? Letter A. So very good. So for those you're participating in a raffle for a Lexus, but you have to go to the conference. That's what it is. Yeah, I forgot to say that. So here we have it. Summarize Title VI, Title VII. Title VI prohibits discrimination based on race, color, and national origin. But Title VII prohibits employment discrimination. So one is mostly really for our service provision, while the other one is for employment. Now, that includes race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. Now, let's look at this. Title VI protects service recipients for being excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program and activity receiving federal financial assistance. Now, Title VII protects employees and job applicants. So even in the process of you applying, just to make sure that you're not being discriminated in all aspects of employment. That includes hiring, firing, training, promoting, disciplining. I don't know if that word is right, but disciplining, compensation, and benefits. Employment practices in general really starts from the moment that you are applying to the moment you leave. Everything that happens in between you and your employer, or when you just want to get there, you are a job applicant, everything that happens there needs to be freed of any discrimination because of the color of your skin or the first language you speak at home. That's what this means. So remember that I told you guys at the beginning that the goal here today was to talk about things that has to do with the service. So how come Title VII relates with service? Because our number one, and this is talking to all management, our number one service recipient, those are our employees. And the employees, we cannot forget that as an organization, we also provide services to our employees. Now, with Title VI, if there's any claim, it has to go, and we need to talk about that in a minute. The claims have to be processed in a respectful way, promptly. We cannot drag our feet. We need to have an actual response quick, and we need to have those procedures in writing. But if something happens and the individual does not feel that it was handled properly, a claim under Title VI could go up until it's taken to the Tennessee Department of Health Civil Rights Coordinator. And that is the case if the funds are coming through the Tennessee Department of Health, which is most of the funds that we have. However, if we're talking about the funds that are coming through our partners from Sustento, and those funds come from HRSA also have a civil rights coordinator. So it could go all the way up to the main civil rights coordinator. Okay. In the case of Title VII, a claim could go all the way up to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the famous EEOC, and it could actually get to federal court. They're trying to avoid in any way possible to get to the court. That's what this commission is, a quasi-legal entity that could handle those cases. But remember, what this means that this could not be put under the rug. When there is a claim, it has to be investigated and it could escalate. Now, look at this again, the difference between Title VI and Title VII. Does this mean, because I know that at some point during our visits, several people have this question. So does this mean that I always need to hire thinking that I need to provide participation because this person belongs to what is called protected class? That's a term that it's used a lot within Title VI. A protected class is anyone that falls within those 5 areas there that is a minority because of race or because of religion or because of their color. No, what this means is that for example, in a job applicant or in a hiring process, job applicants with the same education and they both qualify for that position in exact terms, and they both did an amazing interview, that you cannot make the final decision based on how they look. Okay, that is why Title VI is so important. It's not precluding us to make the right decision in a hiring process based on qualifications. Okay, it's making sure that none of those 5 conditions there get in the way of making the right decision. Okay, we are going to be talking more about HR practices during the conference. So guess what? You guys need to go to the conference and you guys need to go to my presentation about HR must-haves for free and charitable clinics. But I'm not going to say that you are going to miss it, but you are if you don't go. So let's continue. So other requirements. And again, this is Title VI, and you will see that some of these requirements apply for everything that we are talking about compliance. Every time we're talking about compliance, I'm sorry. Policies and procedures. That's the first thing. Now that you know what is Title VI, and also we talk about Title VII, however, that's in HR handbooks. But when you talk about Title VI, you need to have your policies and procedures. You need to make sure that they're written. Usually, they include information about anti-discrimination, anti-harassment, and now many places are including language about diversity and inclusion. Why? Because anti-discrimination and anti-harassment starts with the negative word anti, right? Against something. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, it sounds more positive. It sounds in the good way of, no, you are welcome. Here we are. Now, in addition to that, if you have the policy or the procedure, but you don't tell people how to complain when something goes wrong, you're missing a piece. So written discrimination, complaints, the procedures, and keeping a log is important. Okay, we could have complaints and you may not be in trouble, but if you need to keep your log and you need to investigate what happened and you need to make sure that you're taking action. If that happens and you evaluate your current practices, that is good. That is, lessons learned. And of course, making the appropriate adjustments. So it doesn't mean that because we did this training, we cannot make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. We just need to make the appropriate adjustments when that happens. So we need to provide appropriate complaint process, and we need to make sure that we keep record of what is happening, how it was investigated, how it was, handled properly, and how it was resolved. And of course, we need to have a limited English proficiency plan. What is that? It includes having handy an information of a language line, like the one that we have provided our members. Well, it's not free, but you guys have a discount by using that service spoken here. It's important that If you have a huge population of several particular demographics, that you make sure that your materials, your written materials, or your social media or your website have information in more than one language. And again, we're also here to support you. Not only us at TCCN, other members within the network has already materials like the consent forms. They're almost the same for everyone. We can share. In our website, we have a list of materials, policies, and procedures in the resource section that you can use. But if at any time you have the need of any kind of translation services, let us know. We have, in-house and with other members or through the service of spoken here, the ability to translate written documents too. And remember that many of you included this kind of service within your work plans within the disparities grant to get materials translated, to get websites modified. That is the purpose of that funding. And if you didn't think about that, feel free to talk to Mary and let's see what we can do. If you have the policies and procedures, no, let's go back. If you have the policies and procedures, but you're not training your team, you're missing a piece. The policies and procedures, they look beautiful. But if we have not trained our staff, they don't know what that is there. But hold on, there's more than just the staff. You also need to train your board, all management, include contractors, and also your service beneficiaries. They need to be aware of that. Why? Because if we have a complaint process, but your patients doesn't know, they don't know about it, we are missing the point. We are not closing the loop. Contractors, this is really important. Imagine that somebody comes to deliver something at your facility, and that contractor does or says something discriminatory against any of your patients or staff, and you do not correct that behavior, you are allowing an illegal behavior to take place. How do we do that? Well, we can carefully talk to that particular contractor, like, excuse me, you can take that person apart. We do not accept any kind of discrimination. This comment that you just made is considered discriminatory. At the same time, we're educating people. Now, we know that in the times that we're living, many things could happen. It could be that the person is really apologetic, or it could be that the person just blew up. Then, if that's the case, make sure that you talk to the boss of that individual or give them a call that the behavior for that individual is not allowed in your facility. Remember that this also applies to sexual harassment. Okay, so if the behavior of a vendor or contractor or visitor is not allowed, you are required to protect your employees as well as your patients. Now, inform customers about Title VI, and not only customers, also the contractors, also management. How do we do that? How do we talk about all these things that we're talking here? The signage that we talk about. All of you will receive a sign directly from the Tennessee Department of Health about fraud, waste, and abuse, and I think also about Title VI. They ask, how many signs do you want? I send them our entire list of members, send them 2 or 3 to all, to make sure that you all have those signs. So you should be getting that soon. The idea is that it's right there, so even that contractor cannot say, I didn't know. It's right here. The sign is here. You're welcome, people. I wanted to make sure that you guys all have it. So, and when we did the site visits, I noticed that many of you have them. Others, they look a little bit old. So I was like, let's get new signs. We're not paying for them. So finally, after you do all that, make sure that you evaluate your current practices. And that's why any now or then we need to repeat the Title VI training, because we're hiring new people all the time and because some things could be forgotten. It's like the fire drill. If you don't do the fire drill, the day you have a real emergency, believe me, people don't even remember what they have to do. They don't even remember where the fire extinguisher is. That's what the drills are so important. So the same thing with trainings. The trainings about these policies and procedures are important. Some things could get forgotten, okay? Now let's go to the next one. Now, what happens if we are not in compliance? First of all, what is non-compliance? We use that word a lot. Compliance, non-compliance is when there is a failure or refusal to comply with Title VI, Title IX, Section 504, and any other applicable civil rights law. And any kind of failure or refusal of implementing department regulations. We get policies and procedures from the state constantly. I remember that we have mentioned several times Policy 08. Policy 08, those are the travel restrictions by anyone that receives funds that come from the state. Policy 03, that regulates how we assign expenses in an invoice that is just really like financial guidelines. In that case, if we refuse or we decide not to follow any of these restrictions, there are going to be sanctions. Now, which kind of sanctions? Let's see. The first one could be that they withhold the payment to you or that recipient that is under contract until you guys comply. That means that if something happens and the process of the investigation results and we find out there have been no training for the staff in a long time, so the payment could be withheld until training takes place to everyone within your organization and you can provide evidence that everybody was trained, and then you are in compliance. Or if it happens during the investigation that the policy has not been updated, that the signs are not in the wall, that you have not been providing a consent form to your patients, so the payment will get withheld until such activity it's taking place, right? Then, in other words, until we close the loop. Now, depending on the severity of the fault or the problem, it could also mean cancellation, termination, or even the suspension of a contract, either in whole or in part. When somebody gets completely suspended of having contracts with the state, the name of that entity goes into a register. And it is also going into a register from the federal government. So if you make that particular list, you're in trouble. You will not receive any federal funds for a while. And in that case, that means that even us, we won't be able to give you federal funds if your clinic, if your organization made that list. And we don't want to do that, but it could happen. So we, even in trainings I have gone to, Title VI, it doesn't matter if you get $1 or 1 million. The sanctions are going to be the same, because what they're telling you with the suspension or the cancellation of your contract, it's clear, like, you're not worthy of receiving these funds to do work with it because you're not doing good work with it. Okay, so let's avoid that. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, now let's switch gears a little bit. Let me change my hat from HR to accounting. So let's talk about internal controls. When we talk about internal controls, which is another big topic within compliance, We're talking about any kind of rules and procedures that we implement to make sure that our financial and accounting information is accurate, it's appropriate, that we are promoting accountability, that if, we make sure that everybody within that work knows what has to be done. And if any deviation happens, we take action. And essentially, the top of the line is to prevent fraud or misuse of funds. So when we talk about internal controls, everybody thinks, oh, I need to do so much stuff. Well, let's look at the benefits of it. First of all, it's going to help us comply with laws and regulations. It takes us that burden from our backs. It could prevent also employees from stealing assets or committing fraud. Now, it also helps improve our operational efficiency. How? Well, it's going to help us be more accurate and do the work and reports in a timely manner. If we cannot produce reports on time or accurate reports, several things could happen. You can be losing funds. Your cash flow could be down and you don't know it. You could run without the funds to pay for your utilities or pay for your services. That law that you see there, Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, that was, there have been a lot of laws that includes regulations and instructions, but sadly, after several scandals of misuse of funds or reports that were not accurate, you know that a lot of people have lost a lot of money with investments. People have died. People have taken their lives because they realized that they lost everything they have just because one report was wrong. So to prevent that from happening and for some people to get rich by doing the wrong thing, a lot of laws have been put in place to make sure that we have the appropriate internal controls. And there are several entities, not only governmental entities, that have created guidelines on how to do this. Sarbanes-Oxley, sadly, was the result of terrible, terrible market crashes and, the Maddox taking money and the Exxon, many other huge corporations doing whatever they wanted with reports. And that, of course, affected investments. So let's see. Let's continue. Some of the areas most not only important, but easy to talk about and that sometimes we don't even think is part of internal controls are here. First one, segregation of duties, proper authorization of transactions and activities, but it has to be put in writing somehow. Adequate documents and record keeping. Also, the physical control or physical protection of assets, records, or when we're talking about assets, we are talking about computers and we're talking about medical equipment, everything, hard. But when we talk about records, we talk about both virtual, it could be electronic records, it could be actual paper, okay? Now, one other activity that is part of internal controls is just independent checks on performance. And that is not only internal, but it could be external, meaning it's not only like a supervisor checking what the employee did, but also it could be an auditor coming and just checking that the work has been done properly, that you follow the internal controls, that you follow the policies and procedures that are there. Let's continue. So let's define that list that we just saw. Segregation of duties. I use that a lot. I mentioned that word a lot. That means making sure that within one task, portion of that task had been assigned to different people. Why? Because we want to make sure that the person that authorizes something is not the same person that have done everything. The idea of the segregation of duties is making sure that there is a double check, that nothing could start and ends by someone's hand that nobody notices. So it could be, the process could start with someone and someone else, it's required to authorize that. It could be that the person that completed the activity is not the same one that enters that in the accounting books, just to make sure that somebody else had the opportunity to double check what happened. It could also be, when we're talking about assets, that one item could have been ordered. No, go back. That one item could be ordered by someone, but another one receives the item or the asset, to make sure that someone else have the opportunity to check what is coming in, how we're using the money, and making sure that that is really for official use, okay? Authorizations are also very important. That way, we need to make sure that we're not just talking about a rubber stamp, literally, and we want to make sure that managers are aware not only of what they are signing, but they need to be aware of the particular policies and procedures that justify that transaction. Managers, we need to make sure that you understand the existing policies and procedures. If you are asked to always sign travel expenses, or you have to always sign for something to be purchased, make sure that you have with you the policies and procedures that has to do with that activity. Read that document. Make sure that you understand what that signature means. So when your document comes to you, not just sign it, make sure that the policy, the procedure was followed properly. The document is just part of that line of activities that will end with some money being dispersed to someone. So let's make sure that you understand the policies. So when you're signing, you are completely aware that everything is in order. Now, also remember that as managers, we also have activities. We also have PTO to take. We also have purchases to make, and we also have, travel. Make sure that the policies and procedure includes instructions on what to do when the main signator is the one incurring in the expense. So we make the exception that if, let me give you an example with how we do it at TCCN. I sign PTO travel expenses for Mary Moore. And even Mary Kiger, even when she's the executive director, but her expenses, somebody's looking at them. So Mary Kiger signs mine. So they have, in your procedures, you need to have that. We even mentioned there, if something is from the board, who is going to sign expenses from the board if something happens, because they don't, incur any expenses, but if something happens, we include instructions and language in our HR handbook, in our financial manuals, who is the regular approver, and if the expense or the transaction it relates with that person that always approves, then who will be approving mine? That is important. Adequate documents and records are needed. Those always provides evidence of the expenses, that they are real. That is the main thing. The auditor, even from your organization or from the state, they want to make sure that if you said in your bill and you're asking for $5,000 for an EKG, for example, that exists, that equipment came in, and where is it? So documents and records also include how you identify your inventory. So when an auditor comes, they want to see the beginning and the end, everything in between from that transaction. So if that's a purchase, that you look for quotes, you document that activity, that you made the purchase, how you pay it, when it came in, where is it located, who is keeping the equipment, is it being kept in good condition? All that is part of adequate documents and records. The next one. Okay. Physical control of every asset and record. And this is in part what I was just talking about, physical item. But what other controls do we have? Do we have a safe? Who has access to that safe? Do we have ID cards to go into areas, especially if you guys have medication? What controls do we have? If we have files and if those files are fireproof, if we have locks in the file room, if we have locks in the main door. So this is about physical protection as well as computer related activities. Remember that we keep now so much online that there's no paper. I think in our case, all our records are electronic. So who has access to which files? What is the frequency in which a new procedures or new passwords are required? Is anyone keeping the password in a sticky note in the keyboard in your computer? No, no, no. That is not appropriate physical control. All that kind of stuff. And remember that it's not only about you and your coworker. A visitor, a contractor, a patient could be walking by. Are we protecting our information from anyone that could just get lost and get in your office by accident? Now, independent checks has to do with either internally, somebody that will check the process that has not been part in the entire process, or, you could, especially with records, I know that some of you do like cross reference or cross-checking records that, we have a group and this group will check, or the main nurse will be checking the record keeping or the case files from another coworker and vice versa, just to make sure that it's complete. That is one way of doing independent checks. If we're talking about, for example, HR procedures, that whatever happened in one department, the HR manager can check and make sure that it followed the procedure. And another way could be even an auditor coming in and checking financial procedures. Either way, when an auditor gets involved and during an audit, and some of you may have not had a full audit, but just a review. But one of the main differences is that during an audit, they will ask for the internal control procedures. They will ask for HR policies, for attendance policies, which forms are you using? And part of their testing, because that's how they find out if you have been following procedure, part of their testing is actually taking that policy and procedure and put it under fire. Okay, let me see if you're saying that this requires 5 steps. Let me see if you really did the 5 steps every time. And that's called testing. That's how they go back. So always, every time you do something, make sure that when you're keeping the document alone could give the entire story to that reviewer, either internal or external. And that is appropriate documentation. That's why we and Mary work so hard, making sure that your supporting documentation is clear. But it's not only that it's clear for you, it's clear for anyone that will sit there and look at it. So when we collect documents as part of the billing process of any of the grants, and it's the same process that we have implemented with HRSA, and it's the same one with disparities, and pretty soon with any other grant that we have. It's the idea that whomever takes your bill and all the documents can understand the entire story just by looking at documents. Okay. Next.
I don't know if you're going to cover this, but one of my favorite classes in grad school was actually fraud, waste, and abuse. It was very interesting. We followed case studies of, fraud that had occurred in government or nonprofits. And one of the biggest red flags and risks for fraud was actually people not taking PTO. So that's why in some offices they have mandatory PTO. So it can be a big red flag if someone, especially if they're in like a financial or an administrative position, if they haven't taken a day off in 3 years, it could be because they're scared to take a day off because someone else will see that they haven't been following the procedures that they're supposed to, or that things don't add up. So just wanted to throw that in there.
That is a good point, and actually in some big corporations, they do that with that intention that somebody else would sit in your chair for some time just to double check. Yeah, but it's in one of fraud, waste, and abuse. It's coming soon. So when we talk about internal control essentials, we always start with a checklist. There's multiple checklists, and we can provide you several. We will put, I think there's some already in the resources section on our website, what we could provide for you more. This is just an example, the one you see there, and it's very simple. It takes different main procedures: cash receipts, cash disbursement or payments, payroll, HR, and then it asks you basic questions just for you to do an analysis, like an evaluation of your policies and procedures. And some of them will be, do you have a policy about this? Others will be, does the person that do X activity is the same one that approved the activity? If the answer is yes, you are in trouble, my dear, because you need to find ways of that the approver it's different. We understand that a lot of the clinics are small, and then you have one person doing multiple activities. So sometimes maybe that person that is the hand of all trades and does different things, HR, accounting, and everything, but they're still the executive director. There's some that are even so small that then maybe some of those activities for the purpose of approving will have to go to the board. Not all boards are hands-on. Many boards are just the way of providing guidance and direction. But in some of the organizations, the treasurer in the board has a more hands-on involvement than others. That is possible. Just make sure that your bylaws and your policies and procedures reflect that line of authority there. Always, essentials. Keep your policies and procedures. At least have financial policies. That includes a whistleblower policy. What is a whistleblower? Someone that noticed that something is wrong or something is not being done properly and should have the opportunity and the mechanism to raise the red flag that something is weird. And information about fraud, waste, and abuse. When we talk about fraud, waste, and abuse, it's about, federal and state funds. There's many ways of doing the wrong thing, right? It's not only about going and stealing $1 million and flying away. No, there could be many ways that by the lack of procedures, somebody found a window to slowly start defrauding, taking money, or taking benefits off. It's not necessarily money. It could be also some special benefits, some special treatment. So that is not right, because that's again against the rules. Now, another internal control essentials, please provide training to about those policies and procedures to your board, your management, and your staff. Inform customers about fraud, waste, and abuse policies. Again, that's one of the signs, and it has to be visible. So if anybody's noticed that somebody, could be a patient in the waiting room, noticing that this person took this bunch of pens and put it on the bag and it's going to take it, that's taking advantage or benefit of something that belongs to the clinic. And of course, evaluate your current practices. Nothing could be set in stone, things change. And it's important that We go back, we review the documents, something as simple as the mileage reimbursement rate. It has changed twice this year. It didn't change for 20 years, but this year it has changed twice. So you need to make sure that your policies are updated with that. Okay. One of the main ways of defrauding organizations is by the use of credit cards. If there are credit cards, and I have gone to multiple trainings with CPA firms showing that the small businesses and nonprofits, this is one big issue. Credit cards that belong to the organization that sadly are not used properly because nobody is watching, because nobody takes the statement at the end of the month and put all the receipts together to make sure that this is a legit transaction. Something as simple as cross-checking receipts with your credit card statement, making sure that everything is there, save them all together, have someone to sign them. That is a good way of making sure that nothing is escaping your eyes. Next. Any questions? I know that there's a ton of stuff. Thank you, Julia. During the conference, here we go again. During the conference, there's going to be a session only about HR matters. We were thinking that if there's the audience for that during the conference, we want to talk about internal controls and maybe in a way of a workshop. So in the evaluation form that you have to complete now, there is one particular question about that. We just want to know if there will be enough people for that, for a session about that, internal controls. And we will start, it will be a workshop. It will be us working together, going through a questionnaire. So you know where you are, and from there, what are the next steps? So in the jot form that Mary put in the chat, if you go, in addition to the evaluation that takes 3.5 seconds, there is just one more question if you are interested in a workshop like that. No questions. I hope that now you're not as confused as you were before, that you have some additional information for your toolkit. So please complete the jot form.
We've had a few respondents so far, so thank you.
Good. And remember, no question is a bad question. So if you prefer to give me a call or email, or even also, Mary Moore, make sure that you send us those details. If you may think of another topic within everything that has to do with internal controls or policies or procedures, include that in your jot form. There's a section for comments. We want to make sure that the contents we provide you guys is exactly what you need. Okay, Julia is asking, should all of these employee trainings be annual or at time of hire? Some things as the policies and procedures, it will be good that you include that during your onboarding process. I have even created like an onboarding checklist to make sure that we cover all those topics. But there's some things that you still need to do retraining, because new policies could be enacted at some point. And there are some topics that are huge. And in the policy and procedure, when you just go, it's just an overview because you don't have a lot of time. So you can do quarterly trainings with your staff where you, and in order then take some of those trainings, essential trainings about discrimination or about um, the basic policy and how to do a request for funding or how to do a request for travel or things like that, that you can do refreshers. If you do not have time for a quarterly training because you have all these topics, another thing that it's also suggested is that you can uh, record a quick training or a quick refresher. There are several platforms, even with YouTube, like Martin does that a lot, that he uses YouTube, and when it's ready, he sends that to the staff and says, okay, there's a new training, check this, and they can just click on that link, and they is Martin or somebody else doing the training, 15 minutes or so, and then you did a retraining. Other times, there's another tool, Loom, I think it is, that Renee has used also to post things in our website. But training really is forever. You need to pick and choose which will be more appropriate for that onboarding, because the HR handbook alone may be huge. And retention will be limited because there's so much going on during that onboarding that evidently you may have to do a retraining yet later. The state requires that Title VI is something that you do a refresher every year. And you guys can take this presentation, or we can send you a presentation only about Title VI that you can do with your clinics, in your clinics. But in that case, remember to keep an attendance sheet. And that is really important to show compliance that you did the training. And do a test and let me know how it goes. So the next slide is a very important reminder. It's getting close, the conference. Just a month away. We start with the pre-conference on September 27th. Remember that it's about the mental health first aid, and it will be provided by Mental Health America of Mid-South. We only had 18 attendees, and we want the maximum is 30. So we would love to have you all there. Remember that the expenses are covered by our grant. So I suggest, and let me tell you, this training is not only for service providers. They're going to be talking in general, things that you can even apply in your personal life, how you detect or even support someone that could be going through anxiety or depression or even suicidal ideations. Now, the conference starts on September 28th until September 30. We are very excited. We have 103 attendees. We want to have more. There's still some of the clinics that, or awardees that included that within their budgets for the disparities grant that has not signed in yet. And even when we still have time for the event, I need to do some sit down with the hotel and make sure that everything is in order. So go on, sign in. We'll see you there. Remember, my email is right there, annabelle@tccnetwork.org. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you all there.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Great job, Annabelle.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope nobody fell asleep.
No. Hi, I just want to say
Hi.
thank you for this training because I love all things HR and people. So thank you for this training. I think it was very helpful and important just to make sure that we're doing the right things, right? It's a
Mhm.
shame that we
You
have to do
register,
those
right?
things.
You're
Yes.
going to be at the conference because I think I saw your name. Yeah, we're going to have one session that is all about HR. But if you need anything like policies and procedures and stuff, we have those.
Yes,
Okay.
so that's one of the things that we definitely want to develop more on. I think we did like a survey a little while ago that talks about some of the things that we want to do, and that was one of the things is develop the policies and procedures handbook a lot more.
Okay.
So I'm
I
so
have
happy.
several templates and I can give you a hand with that.
Okay, that'll be
Very,
awesome.
very
Thank
good.
you so much.
Take care.
You as well. Bye bye.
Bye bye.